when I'm connecting microphones and things that need really good shielding, that's built into it, and just the ease of that cable being a consumer piece. I can go to a Best Buy, I can go to a Target, I can go to a gas station and probably find an HDMI cable if I had to. I mean, I go to Mapco, they got a great selection. It was just a decision made, and a lot of it had to do with the shielding on the cable.
So I'll ask this real quick. Do we support like actual HDMI extension over category cable then as well? If we can we get down that weedy road?
No,
Okay.
we're not sending HDMI protocol.
I didn't think. I just
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And if that's the case, you probably just need to extend the DCS LAN. RJ45 shielded.
Yep.
How does that connector lock the HDMI? I saw the release.
On the back, there is actually the way that it's molded. If you're familiar with like a VGA, how it's got the screw pins on the side, this has got a single pin in the top of it, and you just simply screw it in. So let me back up there. That little hole above the HDMI flat part, it's the actual connector on the cable that has the screw pin built into it. We had a loose one laying around. I think it's back there. Great for podiums. Great for locations where you don't need a speaker, an actual speaker, but maybe somebody needs to present to the board, that's city council. We just need a microphone that's on a gooseneck that allows somebody to push a button to speak, to be recognized, or for a chairman to control that mic. So instead of using just the MIU box, where it may be a standard 58 that's injecting that audio into the system, I want to be able to control that mic. So I can turn the podium off, or I can simply make that a request to speak position. This is how you would add that to the system. And again, you do have the 3.5 headphone connector. And then if you do need to add a speaker to the system, you simply add that speaker. It's a larger plate, but it is smaller than the flush mount. And all of this we do have in the back mounted on display. There's a better picture of that HDMI cable right there. Okay, so we kind of talked about using this to inject audio into our DCS LAN system and the MXC IC interpreters console.
Excuse me.
Yes.
The MXC MIU.
Yeah.
What mounting options do you have for that?
So this box comes with a U-bracket. If you're familiar with any of our A&I, like 4-in, 4-out boxes, this is a spitting image of that box. And so it actually comes with a U-bracket. If you flip the display back there over there, we've actually got it mounted with the bracket. So you can sideways, under the table. It is meant to be hidden somewhere in a piece of furniture. Yeah. MXC IC. Really cool piece, really heavy piece. Looks cool. Again, like what we talked about, conforms to the ISO standard. Headphone jack on the side of it, loudspeaker on the rear of the unit, and of course I asked the same question, why is it on the back? Interpreters sit in a glass booth and the audio reflects off the glass back into their face, which is why the speaker's on the back of the unit. And a port on the bottom, so if we do a permanent install and we don't want junk hanging off the side, we've got a jack on the bottom of this as well. More braille and tone controls built into it. Brightness, contrast. We're going to allow them to adjust the screen. Your different relay buttons. For folks that are familiar with a large interpretation systems, you may have folks translating from one language to another language, or listening to one translating into maybe not their native language. It allows them to pick and choose what language they're listening to. So if there are any questions, Anthony is the resident expert on this. Our outgoing languages, And then, of course, messaging agenda. All of this information can be displayed on this screen. Name sign. This has been a big hit, actually, with folks that are looking at MXCW. They're tired of the tent card look. They want something that's a little more refreshed, a little more refined. You can write to these signs, and because it's the digital paper, or the e-paper, whatever you want to call it, I can set these up ahead of time and simply disconnect them from the DCS LAN, and it stays written to the sign. So if you're in a situation where you may be doing, say, a press room or any type of broadcast, you're able to pre-write to these signs and simply set them out. You don't have to have them connected to any system. The only reason you need to have them connected is to write to them. And in the situation, which I think we've got an NFC meeting that we can set up where you'll drop your card in, and if you're registered in the participant table, when I drop my card in, it'll change my name sign as well. But other than that, if you just need a quick, neat name sign that looks professional, it's a great piece to add to the system. You can flip this as well, so you can have a white on black or a black on white writing. The bottoms do snap off if you do want a more flush mount look. And I think this slide's been updated to where on the dual participant there'll be an upper and a lower, so it won't be exactly side by side, it'll be offset. And you'll have a little arrow that'll point left to right so you can stick it in front of two people. I don't know how soon, but there will be there is a USB plug that's on the unit, and we're
Work in progress.
okay, good. So right now, to program, you have to have a CCU. So if you do end up buying a bunch of these, you will need a CCU with feature license 6000 for the CCU to recognize the sign, and then you can write to the sign. Otherwise, you can write through software 6000. In the future, the idea is to have a USB I/O that'll basically be like a WYSIWYG program, so you can do imaging on it if you'd like, whatever you want to fill that pixel space with, but that is coming. Bottom of the unit, again, just like delegate units, you have an in and an out. So you do want to be mindful if you are leaving these connected. So people have asked, can I power this off of an MXCW 640? You can. Right now the coding is not written to write to the sign, but we have actually had several people request to actually have it written to the sign where you sit down. It's not so much the power, but the coding of it. So that's something that we've had to request for. I don't know if and when, but it does actually just, the only time it's taking power is when you're writing to the sign. You don't need power, again, to hold the image.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is there, with that update that they're considering, would it be the kind of thing that you could put in an NFC card and have it write your information to the sign?
That would be the dream come true. I'm saying yes. But just keep bugging Anthony in the back. So here's your two options currently for the name sign. Again, software 6000 with the PC. And then directly in the browser, which we can look at here in a minute. So again, 5905 CCUs, all the different 6000 CCUs, all of that stuff has gone away, and that DIS CCU is now the SKU for the US. Dash US is for the US, so it's one CCU, whether you're in 5900 world or you're in MXC world. So again, like Vanessa had explained, we do need the feature license 6000. So anytime you're talking about MXC and you're purchasing a CCU, or you have existing customers that may have recently purchased a DIS CCU in the past few years, because this new upgraded CCU has been out a couple years already, so it's not considered a new launch with the line. You do have to purchase the FL6000 package in order for the CCU to recognize any MXC delegate unit or sign. So you can see here, when we went from the 5900, we basically gave you the 4 additional outputs on the back of it. So this reduced the SKUs, enhanced the 5900 series, and gave you the maximum number of outputs that we could squeeze on that box. Yes, this has been asked, but the CCU is either a 5900 or a 6000. FL 6000 setup. It is, you cannot use 5900 portable units, flush units, any 5900 series mixed with MXC. They don't work together at all. Went through this fun stuff, and you can do a lot of the setup through the front of it, but again, through the back of it, through the user interface is really the easiest way to do it. And we do have command strings set up for this as well. So if you do have AMX Crestron third-party control, you can reach into this and control some of the feature sets. Oh yeah, come back here. So A, B, and C, and D are considered your DCS LAN. Those are chains. These run off of one power supply that's built into the unit. So these are not 4 discrete power supplies. These are just simply 4 outputs off of one power supply so that you can simply run like what we've done in here. This front table is chain 1, or chain A. Chain B, C, D actually covers those back 2 rows as well. So this just gives us an easier way to lay out our wiring, is what you're doing. Your 8 outputs, again, floors, groups, interpreter channels, you get to pick and choose what you want outputting. So in the case of a courtroom system, we need to record the judge on his own isolated track. So we can simply assign the judge, say, to output A, the podium and maybe the witness stand would be B, and then maybe the jury box would be D, and then E could be all of the mics together. It's a backup safety of any mic that's open in the system gets recorded to that track. So you can send multiple discrete outputs of the system. You don't have to send every mic out. And there's your 2 inputs. Line input is really going to be some sort of muxed input. So if you're doing, again, go back to a courtroom situation, I've got a laptop where I'm presenting evidence from, whatever it might be that may have audio with it. This would be maybe put through a DSP or another mixer, and then inserted in here. And that way, if I'm at the judge's table or the jury table, I can hear out my speaker any of that audio in the system. The second input, you'll notice that little emergency piece that's to the side. So if you do have to, by state law, if you're required, or a city or municipality, to have any type of life safety control of the device to where you mute the system and have a separate emergency exit the building recording plane that may come from a fire safety system or something like that, you do have that capability on the box as well.
Just a question about that.
Yep.
Emergency messaging. When that contact closure registers is closed, it just mutes everything.
Yes, as far as I know, it mutes the mics, and then defaults that audio out the loudspeakers. So kind of like same thing in some of the larger PA DSPs where you want to mute all the inputs and only have that.
So then you need that emergency input would need to be on one of those line ends.
Yes, it'd be line 2.
Line 2.
Line 2, yeah. Again, we've hit this, so 250. The word control and power are 2 different words. So keep in mind that the control off of this at 250 is based on 5900. Now, when we go to feature license 6000, we have control of 3800 units. That doesn't mean we can power 3800 units off that one CCU. We will need to add other devices into the system. We'll go into the DCS LAN calculator in a little bit to kind of show how we calculate that, but your cable length plays a part of system design and how you're going to power it and the layout of it. So you've got a power supply built into the CCU, yes. On average, if you're just trying to shoot from the hip as a budget number, you're probably somewhere around 50, call it 45 to 50 units that you can expect to power off of it without additional. But again, that's all based on cable length. The little cute little screen, the user interface is what you're looking at inside. So there's no software to download. All of this control is built in to the box. You just simply web into it. You can use your little jog wheel on the front to scroll down to get your IP address on the CCU, which is one of the easiest, quick ways just to log into it. And we'll take a quick look at this when we dig into it. Let's see here. So again, feature license 6000 allows all of this to work together, and then software 6000 is really when we're going to go deep into the actual control, as well as CDAs, mimics, API control as well. If you need to go that deep, that's if you can't just use control strings and you really got to go all the way down into the API, that's when you're going to get into software 6000. Let's keep moving here. We talked about a bunch of this fun stuff. Whoops. She covered all of this information. So again, if you know you're going to need like 7 channels of interpretation, you know.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Before we get too far away from it, can you go back a slide?
Yeah.
One more, sorry.
This?
Yeah, so the hardware standalone feature licenses are perpetual, the software license are temporary or.
I'm not sure why temporary is written in there. I know why, because
So that was more for the rental market, so
Yeah.
if there was a particularly large event, they had to have specific requirements for, just for a one-off, multinational meeting or something. But for installation-wise, everything's perpetual.
yeah,
Thanks.
buy it once, you're done. By the way, so what that also means too is we can get you a demo license. So if you need to test a system or evaluate a system, we can get temporary licenses. Blow through this fun stuff.
Does the CCU need to have internet access to apply the license, or is that something that's done?
No, that is the license key is dropped into the CCU for FL6000, and it stays inside of it. You do not have to have the unit online for anything. So, speaking of that, for those guys that just love coding, this is actually a way you can open up this .xml file when you receive the license key that you'll enter in, and you'll notice that it actually tells you when it was created, and then it tells you, voting, interpretation channels, all the details of what you actually purchased within that license key. So this is just a quick way to see what you actually have in that license.
So what would need to be done if the CCU fails and needs to be replaced? Do you have to regenerate that license key?
So that license key is based off serial number.
saw that
So
in there.
that would be something that through service, if they sent it back and deemed that the unit could not be replaced, then they would have to regenerate it. The good news is, though, once that lives inside of that CCU, you forget about it. Like, you really don't have to do anything to it.
I was thinking more from the scenario of a hot spare sitting around that I needed to throw in.
Ant, have you ever dealt with that? I've not had anything yet. So with feature license 6000,
Yeah.
because I've not run into this yet, if you've got 2 CCUs on a backup
You'd have to have licenses for both.
for each of them, okay, yeah.
For example, I know Welsh Assembly in Cardiff, they have a permanent backup in the rack. And
Yeah.
for whatever reason, a couple of months ago, they decided they wanted a further CU just for backup, but then didn't order the software. And someone called and said, "You need software." They went, "No, we're fine." And then they used it in a test bed situation in a smaller chamber. And then the phone call, probably about 5:30 on a Friday afternoon going, it doesn't work. Correct. Do you want to talk about that software license again? Oh, yes, please. Which was actually, I think, had already been prepared because we knew it was coming. It was just, right, it's coming, it'll be with you in 30 seconds. On your
Yeah. You already had it pulled. So yes, you will need that. Yeah, because in the past, your CCU, if you bought a 6,000 CCU, you bought a 6,000 CCU. So again, to reiterate, DCS LAN is not your standard network. We're not sending Ethernet protocol over this cabling. This is a proprietary protocol that we are sending along with power over it. So this is just a quick example of the differences of what we're doing on DCS LAN versus what standard data is. So again, when you're talking about DCS LAN, all of the paperwork, all the marketing says proprietary cable. These cables are tested individually to meet spec, which is why we highly, highly recommend and almost require you to use our cables with this system. If you do call into support, they will ask you the cabling if you're having issues with it. If it is not our DCS LAN cabling that we provide, you may be asked to purchase said cabling and call us back. But this is an important part of the system. This is probably 95% of the issues with this system comes down to cabling. And it's more of meeting tolerance. Again, the mindset that it's not just a standard network patch cable. It is a little bit different. It is a little unique to that. Yes, sir.
A couple questions on this, just because of a recent installation where we used a different discussion system that had proprietary ends that had to be cut because they were too big for the conduit that was installed prior to us being contacted for the job. So it turned into a giant junction box on the rack where everything was butt spliced, really ugly. For that situation where terminated RJ45s are simply too large, what's the difference between terminating a female shielded end and a male shielded end? If you're field terminating, your technicians have to be able to do both. So I'm not quite following why the female end is different than the male end.
From what they have seen and experienced, the female end is, when you talk about accuracy of termination, that they're recommending, what we've been told to share is a female end on the cable because it seems to have less of an issue than a male end.
In the old days, you had to crimp the plug on. Most of them today have toolless connectors, which have the same connection as the jack. And so I don't know why it makes a difference.
Is the experience the female end has more tolerance for?
That's what I'm told. I don't sit in service and take the calls. That's. I'm really okay. I'm really okay not to.
You certainly should.
You want me?
Making up fakes for cases, right?
Actually, that would be fun to sit in service for a day. Of course, the other big thing too is unshielded, totally unshielded. So somebody mixed in a few of our unshielded black cables in with our shielded cables, and about 2 road shows ago, we plugged stuff in and we've got stuff blinking all over the room, and it was one stinking cable that got plugged in that you literally had to flip every unit over. So the shielding is a big thing. You do need to have a shielded cable.
Are the DCS LAN cables marked as such?
There's no
Is there any labeling on there?
there's no specific marking on it. If you look at any of our cabling, it's
Just the one in the middle?
yeah, it's kind of unique in what it is. So that's just some information about the cabling. Talked about that. Standard cable runs, again, this is kind of typical of what we know with network cable. Don't crush it. We're deforming the actual shape. We're deforming the ratio of the twist to the insulator, all that stuff. If you've never seen this, if you're not familiar with it, that's a standard issue for any cable of any diameter of what the bend radius should be. We talk about hot plugging. is a big issue if you're on a big long chain. So really what the issue is with hot plugging, so anytime we need to connect or disconnect a unit to any chain, we actually want to go to the rack and power down the CCU. I mean, it only takes about 60 seconds to boot the system, but we do want to power down the system. And the reason behind that is just simply the voltage load of dropping, say, 20 units onto that power supply. This is not something that you're actually going to see with the naked eye per se, but there are issues with hot plugging large chains together. If you're talking about 1 or 2 units, yeah, I've done it before, whatever. But just to be cautious about that you do want to shut it down. So in the past, again, just to touch back on our loop, in the past, if you had a bad cable between the first unit to the second unit, you'd sometimes would end up with another issue down the line somewhere else. And so this way, that audio, the data and the audio will pass both ways in between the two. So we are coming out later this year. Next year, you're going to continue to see some toolbox pieces so that we can actually do some analysis. Right now, those tools are not finished quite yet, but you will have some troubleshooting solutions that will allow you to help pinpoint some of this information even more definitely. So, went through this and talked about our in-out ports. And we talked about mixing MXC with DCS 6000. Just really if you want to keep the redundancy, we just got to keep stuff separate. So we do want to keep, if you can as well, using different ports so that we can maintain a 6000 chain and MXC chain separately. Going through accessory parts pieces. So I meant to grab this on break from next door, but the inserter is basically another power supply. So if you're on a chain where you're out of power or you're adding additional units and you need more power for it, this is the piece you buy. Yes, the brick is twice the size of the box. Yes, that's a really expensive power supply too, but it's a very accurate power supply. So you will need those two pieces to add the power to it. The redundancy controller as well. So going back to if you do have 2 CCUs, this allows you to connect dual CCUs, junction boxes. This is great for simplified wiring. So I bring my chain out and I simply need to shoot some boxes off, say like under a table. I've got 4 under this table. This allows you to do direct point-to-point from a junction box to the unit, which takes the unit loops out of the question. So if you would by chance have a unit go down, it would be on that one run. It wouldn't impact the rest of the system. Repeaters. So if I do need to refresh my signal, I do have an RP 6004. And again, 6010 is just a massive power supply that has 4 of the power supplies built into it. So if I'm doing a really big system or I'm doing a system with a lot of cable length inside of it, and I know I'm going to need more than just maybe 1 extra power supply, this is going to give you 4 discrete power supplies plus the power supply in your CCU, so that gives you 5 power supplies in the system. And of course the DCS LAN switcher as well. So talk through that piece. There is that's your LAN power piece. Talked about the controller. So again, some systems they say can't fail 24/7, must be backed up. We've got all of these pieces, whether it's a power backup or whether it's a controller backup. These are going to be all the little pieces that you're going to add into your system design based on the scope of the project. And just a couple diagrams there. Yeah.
All this information can be found on our land calculator? Land calculator?
So this will not be found on the LAN calculator. you would have to add this in, but what the land calculator will tell you specifically to power is when you're running out of power for that power supply. And we've actually got a diagram up in DCS Land Calculator showing how we've added additional power supplies into the chain in order to properly power the system. Again, junction box, 4 discrete lines. So where you would see this as well as interpreters, any type of interpreters area where you would have 2 interpreters console side by side. This gives you a break directly into that for junction boxes. All of this stuff too, by the way, is again 5900 can be used for that. So if we just need to refresh, this doesn't add any power into the system, but it's just simply the repeater. So this, again, when we get to a certain length, we need to refresh the signal that's in line with it. So this is when we would add this box. This is just plugged straight in. There's no additional power supply needed for a repeater. And a couple examples here. So you'll notice how those loop through to the other repeaters. When you get into a system of this size, if you're concerned about system design, again, we have folks at system support, and what we don't want to do is make this look like it's a rocket surgery project. You know, we want you to know, walk away from here, that we have the tools, the components to scale the system up as big, up to 3,800 delegates, or again, an average size system is somewhere around 30. So if you are on really long cable runs, you're limited in your infrastructure of your facility. We've got all the parts and pieces within the product portfolio to make sure that you can get the job done. Here's just another example of where you might use a repeater on some of these really long runs, where you may be limited in your conduit runs, where you can only get to certain parts of the building. So we've got to go out and around and up and over and below, but we want to keep our signal refreshed. So just a couple examples of how you might lay those out. And so there you go, 680 meters, which is a pretty long run. All right, so there's, again, loop through on the 6010. Again, like what we talked about earlier, it's 4 outputs. On the back of it, 4 discrete chains. Somebody did ask the question, if I'm using this box, how do I use it with MXC redundancy? So this is where you would actually use a junction box to loop out to your MXC chain, and then you'd come back to the box. And then this would just be like, say, a patch cable from the power supply chain output into that box. So that's how you would utilize that. So even though it doesn't have 2 ports, because when you look at a CCU, you've got 4 chains, right? So you basically have 4 ports for that one power supply, and here you've only got 1 port per power supply output. So we just add that in order to create that redundancy feature. And so again, LAN switcher, if you do have, going back to, if you've got dual redundant power supplies, but if you've got separate CCUs, as we talked about doing 2 of those, this LAN switcher is what would switch between the 2 CCUs if you had everything actually hooked up. So you could actually have all this in a rack with a backup CCU, utilizing your LAN switcher. So if one goes down, it automatically switches over. And let's see, fun stuff. Just some other parts pieces. The channel selectors, things like that, when you're just have audience members in an auditorium. Was up in Global Affairs Canada. They had these large 100-seat, 150-seat auditoriums where folks are just listening to presentations. They needed to have floor audio plus interpretation. So these are quaintly mounted into the side of the theater seating, so they can sit down, take their earphones or headphones, plug in, and then listen in the preferred language, or use the floor audio as necessary if they just need a little bit assisted listening. Your 6004, the AO 6004, again, these are 4 audio outputs. So this may be a device that you drop into, say, a press box area where you need a mult off the DCS LAN that has the floor audio for folks to come in and jack in and pull their audio for their, the local broadcast or the news feed. So again, just additional outputs if the 8 that are on the CCU either A, aren't enough, or B, if you need 4 outputs in a different remote location than the CCU. And the 8-channel audio output units. So talk through this. So again, floor audio, go through here. So this is going to be, we do have IR as well. I think we asked about IR earlier in the system too. So again, you've got basically 32 outputs, but this is the inline 8-channel D to A to use with that system. And really basic headset stuff that you don't think about, like the stethoscope thing. Some folks, some cultures have things that won't allow an over-the-head earphone. Some folks prefer a single mono ear clip so they can still hear floor audio, but maybe they're listening to an interpretation, so they may be trying to have a sidebar but still trying to catch what's going on. And then, of course, that IH6500 headset. So that'll be the mic in the earphones that plugs right into that interpreter's console as needed. So,
Excuse me.
yes, sir.
Is there any roadmap for Dante support?
Ant?
Yes, but not something we're going to see in the short term. Originally we wanted to have Dante built into the CCU previously, because effectively at the moment we now have boxes on the desks that are cleverer than the brain itself. That's something that has to happen along with a few other bits and pieces first. But yes, we are looking at building it in.
If you do, in the meantime, if you are looking to do Dante I/O, so what we've actually got back there, we haven't used it today, but we've got a wireless microphone and a body pack back there, and because of the space, I'm just packing everything up. I've got a ULX-D for just the standard half RU width box, and I've got an ANI 22, and the ANI 22's got 2 in, 2 outs. So I'm actually taking the ULX-D output and injecting it into the Dante network, and then picking that audio off at the access point over here, so I can send my wireless mic audio into my access point, and then that audio is routed into your wireless delegate units, and then we've got that feed running in a group back through the access point that outputs that audio, I think, back into the wired system. So we're just using that as an I/O on that. And then
Check
going
1 2.
out with
Hey,
that
hey,
system.
hey.
So that mic is Dante,
There it is.
but it's actually routing through the Dante system to get back into my wired box through the access point. Sorry, that was really convoluted. Really long trip.
Is that why we can hear the MXCW in these units, but not the opposite?
Yeah. When you get this many units close together, you're either really rich, but it also creates a gain stage issue. So that what happens is you basically get too many open mics. Physics, right? Go figure, it still works. You get too many mics, too many speakers, too close together. So we can pass audio both ways, which is why we've got that. So with an ANI 22 is how we can pass audio back and forth. One thing to remember too, the units themselves, and we'll get into this when we hop into DCS LAN here. But just remember that the cable lengths here, each box itself is considered a 100 meter add to it. And so this isn't, again, we're not talking about like a delay thing. We're just talking about cable calculation. So just remember that there's the cable and then the box that you add up to get to it. So we've got 20 millimeters, or 20 meters, excuse me, from the CCU, and then we've got our each 2 meter loop, and then a 10, and it snakes down and around. So that gives us 367 meters. So this is how you used to calculate the length of the system every time. So you'll see what 285 meters is what we're, 15, because we've got 19 units. Even though we have 20 units, the reason why we don't count the last unit is because that's where it terminates. We're not passing through that unit, right? So we don't calculate that length coming back through there. So here's just another example from a CCU. Say we do need to jump down to a 6010. We've got 50 meters. We've got 35 going the other way. And again, based on how you calculate it, remember that we're only passing one way or the other. So that's why the calculation, you're only going to count if you're going 50. But if we drop, say, the 50 meters to that first box, then the purpose is through my crossover, I secondarily would pass it down through the 35. That would be the second calculation of how you calculate that. So all of this is something that used to be a big pain in the butt. We'd have to take all of this, send it over to Copenhagen, and they would sit down and figure this out, put it in Math Lab to be able to tell us, is it good, is it bad? So what we've come up with is DCS calculator that we will switch over to. This is a free app you can go on right now. Just as a guest, log into it, and it'll actually help you design a system, give you a quick bill of materials. So we will hop over. Where do we go here? There we go. So as you can see, this is something that, well, actually, would you like to explain this, Anthony? Since you actually put this together. You can see this is a huge system up here that's got like 90 640s in it. I'll let you take this one.
This is just for indicative purposes, really, just so we could demo it, but we could start a new one as well and just show how easy it is to add. But effectively, you're always going to start with a CCU. Let's come in a bit closer. And then you can add off your different chains. I think probably the easiest thing to do is we start a new one anyway. Not that one, sorry. Let's add new network.
Why don't you add a chain and overload it, anything?
Can do, yeah. You want to do that instead? Okay. Right. By default, it always seems to go top to bottom, but you can rotate it around if you wish to. But it's, so we've got the two chains coming off our CECU here. If we were to click on this, we can add a new unit. We can decide we're going to, I don't know, we'll stick on some more 6040s. We can see down here, we can choose which connection port we wish to go to. It shows that the ports 1 and 2 are already being used. So let's say we're going to stick it into port 3. We want to add, so we're going to stick in 15 units. Ooh. And on average, we're going to have a 2-meter cable between them all. Now we have, as we'd say in Arabic, mushkila, a problem. This is our new chain we've added in here, and because now we've gone over the system's capabilities, this is why we've now gone to red. So at least it's very quick to point out where the issues are. If we scroll. Maybe it's because I've got too many on one chain, so I can click on one of those individual units. If I click on remove subtree, that will take out that unit and everything after it downstream. So that's not the issue. It's just the fact we've got too many units coming off of the CCU straight away. So we probably would need to insert something in here instead. So if we click back on the CCU, whoops. Another unit. I'm going to make sure I stick that on the same chain. It's going in there. That's sticking in there. Then we'd have to split this off to get rid of the red on there. But it's relatively quick and easy to do. You could change a cable length. So obviously before we said that was a 2-meter cable. If I was going to properties. I really don't like this mouse control on here. Oh. I could say that's now going to be a longer cable because it's my initial cable out my control rack to the first unit or to the X, whatever. And that's made the change on there, so it's a 10.5 meter cable. But you sort of get the idea. What we can also do is kind of handy. You can then generate a list of what units you've got in a system. So it's quite good for sort of creating a BOQ or BOM. A new feature that is coming with the firmware update is that you'll be able to, if you've got a system physically laid out and turn this on, it will automatically import that system into your calculator. So if you've got an issue with lights blinking and stuff not working, it will be able to say you've got too much power on one particular chain and assist you that way in fault finding. If you would set up a new calculator, a new network on here, one of the first options it gives you is giving it a name, and also then whether you're talking about a 5900 system, a 6000 system, or an MXC. So you can do all three lots on there. And then when the new diagnostic tools that come out that Michael was discussing, this will also then tie in with it. So be able to help between this, talking about your power, and then the diagnostics about which particular cable you got the issue on. Was that what you wanted, Michael? He's gone. I've been lumbered, haven't I? Excellent. Any questions on the calculator? Is there anything people particularly want to see?
Just so everyone knows, this is in beta right now.
Yes.
So there's a couple of functions that aren't 100%. The most important one being the export function. Currently, to print it, you have to do just a screen grab, but export to PDF is coming soon.
Which it would helpfully tell you it's coming soon, it doesn't say when.
So I've used this a few times, Anthony, but the properties with the wire that you did there,
Yep.
I just didn't realize you could do that. Is that the only thing you can do that with, is to change the length of the wire, or could you go to click on anything and go to properties and
You
change
can click
it?
on anything, yeah. So let's
and
say
then go
we're
to
on
properties and change it? Okay.
So in a junction box here, for instance. You can say it's talking about the chain current, total power consumption. So obviously this is our big issue here at the moment for the whole thing. But it would tell you the unit model down here
And
what cable length's going into it, and
and
so on.
can you change it from there, or do you have to delete it first and then?
For the actual box itself,
Yeah.
I don't know. I've
Oh,
never
okay.
tried, quite
Okay,
honestly.
just-
No, there's no
it doesn't-
drop down.
okay,
Let's
that-
change
that's
it.
fine,
No,
that's- okay, thanks.
it's just an identifier as opposed to be a change it.
One of the things worth noting too is in the past, it was briefly mentioned that if you were doing a system design, it had to be sent to Copenhagen. If you call for support now, you're calling Chicago.
Yes.
So we are in a US time zone. You're not gonna have to wait till the following business day to get a reply. And there has been a push, I was talking with Tim in the the service department last week of call them. They want to help, right? And in the past, these systems were kind of left on their own. But, you know, we do have support available now in the US, readily available, and are looking forward to it. So let's utilize that.
Email, sure,
Service@sure.com.
service or support at sure.
Either one.
We'll get to it,
Yep.
suggest, MXC
Yep.
solution.
Yep. And it's Tim Deere and Dave Mendez are the two primary guys. So they're
Either
Yeah.
support at
or
service
service.
at.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I believe this website is dcsland.sure.com. I can't.
Yeah, dcsland.sure.com, yep.
And it is stored on their server. You can log in on any web browser and enter your credentials and pull up your designs.
Correct, yeah. So I built this, well, back in September, while in Dubai, and I just logged in on this machine just now. Yeah. Michael, your break's over.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, crap. Okay. So we did DCS land, and what am I gonna hop to now? Do you want to do the break it up, do a quick 5-10 minute stretch, and come back, do a little council meeting? A little
A
exciting.
little bit of amateur dramatics.
Amateur. Okay.
Yeah. Amateur being the word.
Yes.
Okay, 10 minutes?
10
Yeah.
minutes?